A car, a lie, and an explosive end. Some betrayals are silent whispers in the dark, but others arrive with the electric hum of a six-figure supercar. For Chloe Davis, the gleaming rose-gold Porsche Taycan was a trophy, a statement of victory in a war she thought she'd already won. She imagined the aging, neglected wife, Catherine Kate Sterling, wilting in her sterile office upon seeing this magnificent machine, a gift from a man Chloe had successfully stolen. What she didn't realize, as she drove towards the visitor parking at the imposing Sterling Tower, was that she wasn't just driving her lover's grandest gesture. She was driving the very weapon that would bring her entire golden world crashing down. Because the name on the title was one she knew well, but for all the wrong reasons. The marriage of Kate and Daniel Dan Sterling had ceased to be a union of passion and had instead become a meticulously curated performance. To the outside world, they were the golden couple of the Chicago elite. He, the handsome, eloquent financial manager at a prestigious firm. She, the quiet architectural genius and senior partner at Sterling and Partners, the firm built on her talent and bearing her name. They lived in an expansive limestone house in the Gold Coast neighborhood, attended the right charity galas, and smiled for the society pages. But behind the closed doors of their limestone facade, silence was a tangible thing, heavy and cold. Kate had devoted her life to her work, while Dan went out charming potential clients with dinners and expensive wine. She was in the studio, her fingers smudged with graphite, her mind weaving blueprints into stunning realities. She designed skyscrapers that redefined horizons and homes that were sanctuaries of light and space. Her firm was her baby, her legacy, and her escape. It was a world of clean lines, logical structures, and measurable success. Everything her marriage was not. For the past year, a chill had seeped into the cracks of their relationship, a frost no amount of feigned affection could thaw. Dan had become distant, his phone guarded with the ferocity of a dragon hoarding its treasure. There were late client meetings that stretched into the early hours, and weekend golf trips from which he returned without a new tan, but with a distinct smell of unfamiliar perfume clinging to his clothes. Kate was not naive. She was observant. She was an architect, after all. She saw the structural weaknesses, the faulty foundations, the hairline fractures that threatened to bring the whole building down. But she was also a strategist. A wrecking ball is messy. She preferred a controlled demolition. Her 40th birthday was approaching, a milestone that felt less like a celebration and more like a demarcation line between the life she had lived and the one she was about to claim. Dan, in a rare moment of performative attention, had asked her what she wanted. Perhaps a trip to Tuscany, he suggested, barely looking up from his tablet. I was thinking of something more permanent, Kate had replied, her voice quiet. Something just for me. The idea had been growing in her mind for months. It started as a whisper of defiance and grew into a roar of self-worth. She had just secured the coveted commission for the new Lakefront Art Museum, a project that would secure her firm's reputation for a generation. The initial signing bonus alone was astronomical. It was her victory, her success, her money. And she was going to buy herself something Dan could never touch, something that symbolized her own power and freedom. 2 weeks before her birthday, she walked into a Porsche dealership alone. She wasn't wearing the power suits she wore for board meetings, but simple, elegant trousers and a cashmere sweater. The young salesman initially overlooked her, catering to men with flashy watches, but an older gentleman named Mr. Arthur saw the quiet confidence in her eyes. "How may I help you, madam?" he asked. "I'm interested in the Taycan Turbo S," Kate said, her voice steady, leaving no room for doubt. She knew exactly what she wanted. She had researched it for weeks. the pinnacle of electric performance, a silent predator. She didn't want it in a flashy red or a boring black. She pointed to a color sample that shimmered under the showroom lights. Frozen berry metallic, a complex, sophisticated shade that shifted from pale pink to lavender, depending on the light. It was unique, feminine, and utterly unapologetic. She paid for it directly from her personal account, one Dan had no access to, the one she had opened when the first hairline fractures appeared in their marriage. The paperwork was all in her name, Catherine L. Sterling. The car was a secret, a promise she made to herself. It was delivered to a private, climate-controlled garage she rented downtown, a space known only to her and her fiercely loyal assistant, Sarah. It was her escape pod, waiting for launch. Her actual birthday arrived with a predictable lack of fanfare. Dan gifted her a pair of diamond earrings that were beautiful, expensive, and completely impersonal. They felt like severance pay. He had made a reservation at Aurelia, a restaurant so trendy it was almost a cliché. Throughout the week, he was more animated than he'd been in months, but his energy wasn't directed at her. He was constantly on his phone, a sly, self-satisfied smile playing on his lips as he typed messages. "Closing a big deal?" Kate asked, swirling the wine in her glass. "Something like that," he scoffed, his eyes gleaming with a secret she knew had nothing to do with finance. "A very big deal, very lucrative. You'll see. I'm about to make a major acquisition." Kate merely nodded, a serene smile on her face. She let him have his petty secrets. Her own secret was parked 3 blocks away, a silent rose-gold testament to the fact that while he was busy playing games, she had already bought the whole stadium. As they left the restaurant, a valet pulled up in a familiar black sedan. Dan, feeling generous, tipped the young man a $100 bill. He turned to Kate, slinging an arm around her. "You see, Kate, some things are simply worth the price," he said. His voice was slick with self-congratulation. "You just have to know how to close the deal." Kate looked up at him, truly looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, felt nothing but cold, calculating pity. "You have no idea," she said quietly, her words lost in the city noise. He was so busy trying to build a new life on her foundation, he hadn't realized she was about to excavate the entire property. "The weapon is deployed." Chloe Davis lived her life through an Instagram filter. Her world was a curated collection of brunch meals, designer handbags, and sun-drenched selfies in exotic locations, all paid for by men who saw her as another luxury acquisition. At 26, she had honed her skills into an art. She was not just a pretty face. She was a student of desire, an expert at reflecting a man's ego until he was so captivated by his own reflection that he would give her anything she wanted. Dan Sterling was her masterpiece. She had met him at a rooftop bar where she'd been celebrating a friend's birthday. He was older, distinguished, with that easy confidence that came from generational wealth. Or so she thought. He bought her a glass of champagne, and his compliments were as smooth and expensive as the vintage. He spoke of his suffocating marriage to a career-obsessed woman who didn't appreciate him. Chloe listened with wide, understanding eyes, her hand resting softly on his forearm, making him feel seen, desired, and powerful. Within a month, he had installed her in a sleek downtown apartment with stunning city views. Her closet began filling with Cartier bracelets and Chanel bags. Dan wasn't just a benefactor, he was a project. She was going to be the woman who finally made him leave his cold, boring wife. She was going to be the next Mrs. Sterling. Her obsession with Kate was total. She spent hours scrolling through old articles about Sterling and Partners designs, examining photos of Kate at charity events. She saw a woman who was plain, severe, always in dark architectural clothes. A woman who looked more comfortable with a blueprint than a branded handbag. The jealousy she felt was sharp, and acidic, not because she wanted Kate's life, but because Kate had the one thing she couldn't yet claim: the name, the legitimacy, the ring. Chloe believed the war was won on the battlefield of material possessions. Every gift from Dan was a point scored. Every secret weekend trip was claimed territory. She documented it all on her private social media, a digital diary of her conquest, for her inner circle to admire. "He says he's just waiting for the right moment," she would tell her friends over spicy margaritas. "His finances are tricky. They're tied up with her company, but he's untangling them. He told me he's about to close a massive deal that will set us up for life. For us." The massive deal was a fiction Dan had invented to keep Chloe placated and to bolster his own dwindling ego. In reality, he was a glorified wealth manager who, despite his expensive suits, was living far beyond his means. His and Chloe's lifestyle was being financed by a complex, deeply illegal system of embezzlement he had orchestrated from the accounts of Kate's own company. He had created ghost vendors, inflated material invoices, and funneled funds through a series of shell corporations. He didn't see it as stealing, but as his due. He was the one networking, the one bringing in the clients with his charm. Kate only drew the blueprints. In his mind, he was taking his rightful share. The Porsche was going to be his grandest gesture yet. After Kate's birthday dinner, he had gone to the private garage where she stored her modest sedan. He planned to borrow it for the weekend, but then he saw it. Hidden under a silk cover in the adjacent bay, a bay he knew Kate also leased, was the unmistakable silhouette of a sports car. His curiosity spiked. He pulled back the cover. He stood aghast at the frozen berry metallic Porsche Taycan. It was stunning. He had no idea where it came from. A new client of Kate's? A company car he hadn't been told about? His mind raced, but it never landed on the most obvious conclusion: that Kate had bought it for herself. Kate didn't do things like this. She was practical, sensible. She drove a reliable, safe car. This kind of extravagant purchase was not in her nature. A slow, malicious smile spread across his face. The car was registered to the garage address, and he had access. He found the paperwork tucked away in the glove compartment. The owner was listed as K.L. Sterling. Perfect. He would pass it off as a surprise he had bought. A car for the Sterling family. But first, he would give the keys to Chloe. It was a brilliant, two-pronged move. It would thrill his mistress and simultaneously assert his control over his wife's assets. He was the man of the house, after all. What was hers was his to dispense, as he saw fit. He called Chloe the next morning, his voice thick with excitement. "Sweetheart, remember that little surprise I told you I was working on? The big acquisition? Don't tell me you bought me another bracelet, Ricky," she purred. "Much, much bigger," he chuckled. "How do you feel about German engineering? Top of the line, 0 to 60 in 2.6 seconds. Chloe was silent for a moment, the implication dawning on her. "No, you didn't." "I did," he said, basking in her anticipated adoration. "It's for you, a pre-engagement gift. I want the world to see how I feel about you. I want her to see it." That was all Chloe needed to hear. "I want her to see it." This wasn't just a car. It was a crown. It was validation. And she knew exactly what she was going to do with it. Her mind immediately began writing the confrontation. She wouldn't just send a photo. She would deliver the message in person. She would drive this symbol of Dan's devotion right to the heart of Kate's kingdom, her office, and watch the Ice Queen melt. "When do I get it?" She breathed into the phone, her heart pounding. "Tomorrow," Dan promised. "Be ready. Wear something spectacular." The next afternoon, Dan met Chloe at a discreet location, a few blocks from the private garage. He stood by the Porsche, the electric motor making only a whisper. The frozen berry color seemed to glow in the afternoon sun, a beacon of bold luxury. When Chloe saw it, a genuine, unscripted gasp escaped her lips. It was more magnificent than she could have imagined. It looked like something forged from crystallized champagne and ambition. "Oh, Ricky," she breathed, running a perfectly manicured hand over the hood. It's perfect." Dan smiled, his chest swelling. This was the adoration he craved, the validation he never got from Kate. Kate would have asked about insurance premiums or charging infrastructure. Chloe only saw the statement it made. "It's the best for the best," he said, handing her a key fob. "There's only one of these keys. It's all yours." He, of course, had kept the spare key that came with the car's documentation. He leaned into the lie he had so carefully constructed. "I bought it for us, really. It's in the family name for tax reasons. You know how it is. But I want you to drive it, to break it in." Chloe wasn't listening to the details. She was already framing the perfect Instagram story. The key fob in her hand, the Porsche logo prominent. The caption was already writing itself in her head. "Some girls get flowers, others get the whole damn dealership. Blessed upgrade." She slid into the driver's seat, the scent of new leather and expensive electronics engulfing her. The cockpit felt like a spaceship. "I can't believe this is mine," she whispered, her voice filled with reverence. "It is," Dan said, leaning in to kiss her. "Now, I have to go to a meeting. Some investors I need to shake hands with. You go enjoy. Show it off. You earned it." He gave her a knowing wink. "Maybe drop by some places where it will be appreciated." He didn't need to be more specific. They both knew exactly what he meant. As he walked away to hail a cab, Chloe watched him leave with a triumphant smile on her face. He was so predictable, and she was going to give him exactly what he wanted. Her first stop wasn't a drive along the lakefront or a tour of downtown. Her destination was singular, a bullseye she had been aiming at for months. She programmed the address of the Sterling Tower into the car's state-of-the-art navigation system. The silky smooth GPS voice felt like an accomplice guiding her toward her final victory. Driving the Taycan was an experience unto itself. The silent, instantaneous acceleration was intoxicating. At every light, she felt the eyes of other drivers and pedestrians on her. They were looking at the car, but she felt as if they were looking at her, anointing her as someone special, someone who had arrived. She blasted her music, an unapologetic playlist of female empowerment anthems that felt hilariously ironic in context. As she turned onto Wacker Drive, the heart of Chicago's financial district, the towering canyons of glass and steel seemed to open up for her. The Sterling Tower was one of the newest, most prestigious buildings, a sleek, modernist masterpiece that Kate's own firm had, ironically, helped design the interior for. The irony was lost on Chloe. She only saw it as the enemy's fortress. She bypassed the underground public parking, driving directly into the short-term visitor loop right in front of the main entrance. It was a blatant violation of the building's parking rules, meant only for quick drop-offs. But that was the point. She didn't plan to stay long. She wanted the car to be seen. She angled it in such a way that the unconventional color made it impossible to ignore. Taking a deep breath, she checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her lipstick was perfect. Her expression was a carefully constructed mask of serene confidence and pity. She grabbed her handbag, ensuring the Porsche key fob dangled conspicuously from her fingers. The lobby was a cavern of marble and glass, filled with people in expensive suits moving with purpose. A stoic security guard at a large granite desk watched her approach. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked. His tone flat. "I'm here to see Catherine Sterling," Chloe said, her voice honey-sweet and arsenic-flavored. "I don't have an appointment, but I'm quite sure she'll want to see me. It's a personal matter." The guard made a call. After a moment, he looked at her. "Mrs. Sterling's assistant says she's in a meeting. Can you wait? Or you can leave a message." Chloe smiled. "Oh, I'll wait. Tell her assistant that a delivery has been made. A very special delivery from her husband. She'll understand." She sat on a low leather sofa, crossing her legs and making a show of scrolling through her phone, the key fob still visible. A thrill ran through her veins. This was the final scene of the movie, where the brave heroine wins the man in the castle. She held the keys to the kingdom and was about to march straight into the throne room and announce that the queen was dead. She had no idea she was the jester about to perform the most humiliating act of her life in the queen's very own court. Checkmate. Sarah was more than Kate Sterling's executive assistant. She was her gatekeeper, her confidant, and her early warning system. A smart, impeccably organized woman in her mid-30s, Sarah had been with Kate since the firm's early days and possessed a loyalty as unshakable as the foundations of the buildings they designed. She was the first person to notice the anomalies in Dan's expense account, and the first person Kate confided in when the whispers of infidelity turned into a roar of certainty. When the call came up from lobby security, Sarah's finely tuned senses went on high alert. "A Miss Davis is here to see Mrs. Sterling. Says it's a personal matter regarding her husband." Sarah's back straightened. Davis, the name from the private investigator's report. The name on the credit card statements for lingerie and weekend getaways. "Mrs. Sterling is in a client meeting that cannot be interrupted," Sarah said, her voice pure ice. "The lady said to tell you Mr. Sterling has made a special delivery." Sarah's eyes narrowed. This was an escalation. Bold and reckless. "Thank you, Frank. I'll take it from here." She walked the short distance to Kate's office, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of the city and the lake. Kate was not in a client meeting. She was standing over a large blueprint, her concentration absolute. "Trouble?" Kate asked, without looking up. Sensing Sarah's presence, "The blonde from the file is in the lobby," Sarah said bluntly. "She's trying to talk her way up." Kate set her pencil down with deliberate calm. She looked at Sarah, and for a fleeting moment, a flash of weariness crossed her face, but it was replaced almost instantly by steely resolve. She had been preparing for this in one way or another for months. She had hoped to control the timeline, to execute her plan with surgical precision. But if the enemy was bringing the battle to her gates, she wouldn't hide behind the walls. "She mentioned a special delivery from Dan," Sarah added. Kate's gaze drifted toward the window, down to the street below. And then she saw it, parked brazenly in the fire lane, gleaming like a toxic flower. The frozen berry Porsche. Her Porsche. A slow, cold comprehension washed over her. It was bold. It was idiotic. And it was the final, irrefutable piece of evidence she needed. Dan hadn't just been cheating and stealing. He was monumentally, catastrophically stupid. "Let her up, Sarah," Kate said, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. "Are you sure?" "Oh, yes," Kate said. "Please show Miss Davis up and ask Robert from accounting to join us in 5 minutes. Bring the binder from the bottom right drawer of my desk, the blue one." Sarah, recognizing the tone of a general about to spring a perfectly laid trap, nodded sharply. "Right away." Soon, Chloe was tapping her foot impatiently in the lobby when Sarah appeared. "Miss Davis, Mrs. Sterling will see you now." Chloe stood, a triumphant glint in her eyes. It worked. She followed Sarah to the elevator, the silence thick with unspoken animosity. They ascended to the 48th floor, the penthouse level occupied solely by Sterling and partners. The doors opened to a reception area of minimalist elegance, slate floors, brushed steel accents, and walls adorned with framed awards and impressive architectural photography. Sarah led her through the open-plan studio, where dozens of architects and designers worked in focused silence. Heads lifted as Chloe, all tight white designer dress and brazen confidence, passed by, a stark contrast to the firm's sober aesthetic. Chloe reveled in the attention, imagining them as Kate's loyal subjects, witnessing the arrival of the new queen. They reached the glass double doors of Kate's office. Sarah opened one and announced, "Miss Davis is here, Kate." Kate stood by the window, her back to the door, looking out at her city. She wore a simple dark navy business dress, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked powerful, serene, and utterly in her element. "Thank you, Sarah. You can close the door." Chloe strutted in, her heels clicking on the polished concrete floor. She let the silence hang for a moment before beginning her rehearsed speech. "Clara," she began, her tone dripping false sympathy. "I know this must be difficult. I truly didn't want it to be this way." Kate slowly turned around. Her face was a mask of polite neutrality. "Miss Davis, I'm afraid you have me at a loss. To what do I owe this unexpected visit?" The feigned ignorance was exactly what Chloe had anticipated. "Oh, please, let's not play games. I'm here about Dan, about Ricky. He feels terrible about hurting you, of course, but we can't help who we fall in love with." She approached the client chairs in front of Kate's large desk, and instead of sitting, perched on the edge of it, a deliberate act of territorial marking. She dangled the key fob from her finger. "He wanted me to have this, you see," Chloe said, her voice rising with excitement as she went in for the kill. "He said he wanted me to have something beautiful, something to show how much he values me. He's leaving you, Kate. He's just been waiting for the right moment to tell you." She paused, waiting for the tears or the outburst. The breakdown. She got nothing. Kate merely observed her with an unnerving stillness. "He bought me a car," Chloe pressed, her voice becoming a little shrill. "A Porsche. It's downstairs. A Taycan Turbo S. He said it was time for an upgrade in every sense of the word. I guess he's finally realized he deserves a woman who's as fast and exciting as his own life, not some boring architect who's married to her job." She stood up and walked to the window, gesturing grandly. "It's that one, the pretty rose-colored one. He said the color reminded him of my skin. It's so romantic." This was her triumphant moment. She had laid her winning card on the table. She had flaunted the ultimate symbol of her victory right in the wife's face, in her own seat of power. She turned from the window, a victorious smirk on her face, ready to witness the complete and utter devastation of the woman standing before her. Kate Sterling let the silence stretch, allowing Chloe's triumphant words to hang in the air like cheap perfume. She watched the younger woman, the smug expression, the defiant posture, the way she brandished the key fob like a scepter. It was all so theatrical, so profoundly pathetic. For a moment, Kate almost felt a pang of pity for her. This woman was a pawn in a game she didn't even know she was playing, a game orchestrated by a fool and about to be ended by a queen. Finally, Kate spoke. Her voice was devoid of warmth or hysteria. It was calm, precise, and as cold as the window glass beside her. "A Porsche Taycan Turbo S," she repeated, as if savoring the words. "In frozen berry metallic. Yes, it is an impressive car. The performance is unparalleled. The regenerative braking system is an engineering marvel." Chloe's smile wavered slightly. This was not the reaction she had anticipated. She expected tears, rage, a screaming match, not a technical review. "Oh, yes, it's very fast," Chloe stammered, feeling a strange sense of unease. Kate was controlling the narrative, steering the conversation in a direction she didn't understand. "It is," Kate nodded, taking a small step forward. 0 to 60 in 2.6 seconds. 560 horsepower with overboost. A top track speed of 161 miles per hour. "Did Dan tell you all that?" Chloe blurted, the sense of unease growing stronger. "He wouldn't know," Kate said, her voice dropping a fraction. He's never driven it. In fact, until yesterday, he didn't even know it existed. A confused frown creased Chloe's forehead. What are you talking about? He bought it for me. It was a surprise, for our future. Kate allowed herself a small, humorless smile. Miss Davis, Dan has many flaws. He is a liar, a narcissist, and, as I have recently discovered, a thief. But one thing he is not is original. He doesn't have the imagination to choose a car like that, let alone in that specific color. He would have bought a red Mercedes because he is a cliché. She took another step closer, her eyes fixed on Chloe's. You see, Dan didn't buy you that car. He couldn't afford it. The commission he earns in a year wouldn't cover the down payment. That's not true, Chloe insisted, her voice trembling. He's a brilliant financial manager. He just closed a big deal. At that moment, there was a soft knock on the door. Sarah entered, followed by a nervous-looking man in a rumpled suit, carrying a blue binder. You asked for me, Mrs. Sterling? Asked the man, Robert from accounting. Yes, Robert, thank you for coming, Kate said, not taking her eyes off Chloe. Miss Davis was just telling me about the very expensive gift Dan gave her. She finally turned her gaze to the key fob in Chloe's now slack hand. May I see that? It was a command, not a request. Hesitantly, Chloe extended it. Kate didn't take it. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out an identical key fob. She pressed the lock button. From 48 stories below, the Porsche emitted an audible beep. Its lights flashed once. A wave of confusion washed over Chloe's face. Kate then pressed the unlock button. The car beeped twice. I believe this is where the confusion lies, Kate said, her voice lethally smooth. Dan didn't give you a key. He gave you my spare. You see, Miss Davis, I bought that car 3 weeks ago as a birthday present to myself, with a small portion of the signing bonus from the new Lakefront Museum project, a project worth 9 figures. It was purchased from my personal trust, paid for in full. The title, the registration, the insurance, it's all in my name. She gestured to the accountant. Robert, if you would be so kind. Robert, overwhelmed, opened the blue binder. On top was a crisp, clear copy of the vehicle's certificate of title. He held it up. The name listed under owner was clear even from a distance. Catherine L. Sterling. Beneath it were copies of the bank transfer and the bill of sale. Chloe stared at the documents, her face losing all color. Blood drained from her head, leaving a dizzying, roaring sound in her ears. The white designer dress suddenly felt cheap and suffocating. The whole scene replayed in her mind. Dan's smug declarations, his lies about tax purposes, and the family name. Everything clicked into place with sickening clarity. No, she whispered, shaking her head in disbelief. No, he wouldn't. Oh, yes, he would, Kate said bluntly, because he is a parasite who believes what is mine is his to give away. He saw my car, a symbol of my success, and tried to use it as a tool to impress you and humiliate me. It was a pathetic, desperate move, and it was his last. She took the key fob from Chloe's now limp fingers. I believe this belongs to me. The humiliation was a physical force that pressed down on Chloe, stealing the air from her lungs. The accountant's eyes, Sarah's silent judgment by the door. It was all too much. The grand triumph had turned into a public disgrace nightmare. Sarah, Kate said, her voice now sharp and professional. Please have security escort Miss Davis off the premises. It appears she left her car in the fire lane. I'm sure they can tow it from there if she doesn't move it immediately. But since she doesn't have a key, that might be difficult. The finality of the statement was brutal. Chloe stood frozen, utterly defeated. The woman she had dismissed as a boring, neglected wife had just dismantled her entire reality with a surgeon's precision and a predator's coolness. As Sarah gently but firmly took her arm to lead her out, Chloe looked back at Kate, who had already turned her attention to the documents Robert held. She hadn't been a rival. She hadn't even been a threat. She had been a messy, minor inconvenience, and she had just been cleaned up. The walk of shame back through the office, past the curious, fixed faces, was the longest drive of her life. Epilogue. The Queen of Chicago. The silent victory and the hours following Chloe's humiliating exit passed in a blur of controlled activity for Kate. She had a brief, calm meeting with her senior partners, assuring them a personal matter was being handled and would have no repercussions on the firm's operations. She reviewed the museum blueprints, making a few sharp, insightful notations. To any observer, she was the epitome of professional composure. But beneath the surface, a cold fury was boiling, waiting for the right moment to be unleashed. She left the office at 6 on the dot. She did not take her usual car service. Instead, she took the elevator to her private garage. She walked over to the Porsche, her Porsche, and slid into the driver's seat. The smell of new leather was now contaminated with the faint, sickly sweet scent of Chloe's perfume. Kate grimaced and lowered all the windows, letting the cool evening air purge the unwelcome scent. She drove home, not with speed, but with a deliberate, almost processional slowness. Every stoplight was a moment to breathe, to center herself, to sharpen the edges of her anger into a fine, dangerous point. When she pulled into the garage of their Gold Coast home, Dan's car was already there. He had come home early. Good. She entered the house through the mudroom. He was in the kitchen, pouring himself a generous glass of whiskey. He was humming, a sure sign of his self-satisfaction. He thought his little stunt had worked. He thought he had successfully played both women and come out victorious. "There you are," he said, smiling brightly. He didn't notice the storm clouds in her eyes. "Long day? You look tired." "It was an eventful day," Kate said, setting her briefcase down on the marble island she had designed. "Did anything interesting happen?" she asked, taking a sip of his drink, the image of casual innocence. "A woman named Chloe Davis paid a visit to my office today," Kate said in a flat voice. Dan choked on his whiskey. He coughed. His face went red. His eyes widened in panic. He quickly composed himself, attempting a look of confusion. "Chloe? I think she's a client's daughter. A bit of a troubled girl. Why would she come to see you?" "She came to inform me that you were leaving me," Kate continued, ignoring his feeble attempt at deflection, "and to show me the extravagant gift you had bought her. A Porsche, Dan, a Porsche. Rose gold." Dan's composure began to crack. "Now, Kate, there's been a misunderstanding. That car, I bought it for us. For you, for your birthday. I was going to surprise you with it this weekend. That silly girl must have gotten confused. I let her take it for a spin. That's all, as a favor to her father." "Stop!" Kate said, her voice dangerously low. The single word cut through his blustering defense like a shard of glass. "Just stop lying. Stop. Every lie you speak is an insult to the 20 years of my life I've wasted on you." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick leather folder. Not the blue one from the office. This one was black. She slid it across the island toward him. "The car is the least of your worries." He looked at the folder, then at her, his bravado finally dissolving into tangible fear. "What is this?" "That is the result of a 6-month investigation by a forensic accounting firm," Kate said. "It appears there have been some financial irregularities at Sterling and Partners. Ghost vendors, inflated construction material invoices, a series of payments funneled through shell corporations, offshore, in the Cayman Islands. A total of $4 million has been embezzled from my company over the past 2 years. Dan's face went white. He looked as if she had physically struck him. He sank onto a nearby stool, his hands trembling. "Everything," Kate continued, her voice relentless. has been traced back to accounts controlled by you. Your secret accounts. The ones you used to pay for Miss Davis's apartment, her shopping sprees, her little trips. The ones you were using to build your pathetic little fantasy life, all with my money. Kate, I can explain. His voice was a raspy whisper. It was only a loan. I was going to pay it back. I made some bad investments. You are a thief, Kate affirmed the words, hitting him with the force of a verdict. You didn't just cheat on me, you stole from me. You stole from my employees, from my partners. You tried to poison the one thing in my life that I built with my own hands. He looked up at her, his eyes pleading. The charming, confident man was gone, replaced by a desperate, cornered animal. Please, Kate, we can fix this. I'll pay it back, I swear. We don't have to tell anyone. Think of our reputation, our friends. You are no longer in a position to think of anything. A new voice cut in from the doorway. Kate and Dan turned. A tall, impeccably dressed man stood there. It was Jonathan Miller, Kate's lawyer, and one of the most feared litigators in the city. Jonathan! Dan gasped. Dan, the lawyer replied with a short nod. Kate asked me to be here. She has I believe, laid out the preliminary facts of the situation. He opened his own briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. These are divorce papers, citing adultery and financial malfeasance. You will vacate this house tonight. You will not contact Kate or any employee of her firm. You will be given a small allowance from a joint account to cover your immediate living expenses, an act of generosity I advised against. Then he pulled out another set of documents. This is a confession and repayment agreement. You will sign over all your assets, your pension, your investment portfolio, everything, to begin repaying the $4 million you stole. In exchange for your full cooperation, Kate has agreed, for now, not to file criminal charges. Criminal charges. Embezzlement of this magnitude carries a sentence of up to 15 years in federal prison, Jonathan said calmly. I advise you to take the deal. It's the only one you're going to get. The fight left Dan completely. He was trapped, outmaneuvered at every turn. He had underestimated Kate so profoundly, it was staggering. He saw her not as a partner, but as a resource to be plundered. He never saw the brilliant strategist who was tracking his every move, patiently gathering the evidence she needed to utterly destroy him. With a trembling hand, Dan Sterling, the golden boy of Chicago finance, picked up the pen he offered by the lawyer and began to sign his life away. Kate watched him, not with hatred or even satisfaction, but with a deep, cleansing emptiness. The gilded cage was finally open. The performance was over. Epilogue. Freedom on Wacker Drive. 6 months later, the Chicago autumn was painting the city in shades of gold and crimson. Kate Sterling stood on a temporary steel platform, 4 stories off the ground, the cool wind whipping strands of hair beneath her hard hat. Below her, the construction site of the new Lakefront Art Museum hummed with the organized chaos of creation. The smell of wet concrete, sawdust, and the vast, cool expanse of Lake Michigan filled the air. This was her element, not the sterile silence of a boardroom, but here, where blueprints and dreams were being forged into reality. Curtain wall installation is ahead of schedule, Mrs. Sterling, said the site foreman, a burly man named Peter, his voice shouting to be heard over a nearby crane. The way you designed the cantilevered West Gallery, it's a thing of beauty. The guys scratched their heads at the plans, but now that they see it taking shape, they get it. It's going to look like it's floating in midair. Kate smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that reached her eyes. That's the idea, Peter. Thank you. Keep up the excellent work. As she looked out at the rising skeleton against the bright blue sky, her vision taking tangible shape, she felt a profound sense of peace. This was real. This was hers. It was a legacy built of steel, glass, and intellect, a foundation far more stable than her personal life had been. The ghosts of her recent past rarely visited her here. They had been exorcised by the relentless drive of her work and her newfound freedom. A notification vibrated on her phone, tucked into her jacket pocket. She already knew what it was. On the 10th of every month, at 9:00 a.m., she received the same automatic, sterile email from the recovery account Jonathan Miller had set up. Subject: Montero Repayment Fund. Monthly installment received. It was a silent digital confirmation of her victory. The first month she had looked at the paltry sum, a small fraction of what he had stolen, and felt a flicker of grim satisfaction. Now it was just background noise, a reminder of a man who had shrunk into total irrelevance. The last she heard of Dan came through the city's notoriously efficient gossip mill. Stripped of his assets and his career, he had sold the last of his designer watches to afford a moving van and had driven to a dreary suburb in the south to move into his sister's basement. His last communication with Kate had been a long, rambling email sent from a generic Gmail account, full of self-pity, blame, and a pathetic last-minute appeal to their shared history. She had read the first 2 sentences, recognized the familiar cadence of his narcissism, and deleted it without a second thought. He was a closed chapter, a poorly written one. Chloe Davis had faded even more completely. Her social media accounts were deleted, her name disappearing from the digital world she had so desperately tried to conquer. Sarah had mentioned, with a distinct lack of sympathy, that a friend of a friend had sworn they'd seen her working behind the cosmetics counter at a department store in a mall an hour out of the city. Her face was without her usual heavy makeup, her designer clothes replaced by a polyester uniform. She was just another girl again. Her 15 minutes of infamy had expired. Kate felt nothing upon hearing the news. No pity, no triumph. Only a vast, final indifference. Later that afternoon, back in the sun-drenched offices of Sterling and Partners, the change was palpable. The oppressive tension that had subtly permeated the firm during the last year of Kate's marriage was gone, replaced by a vibrant, collaborative energy. She had promoted 2 deserving young architects and had launched an internal innovation initiative, encouraging her team to push boundaries. She was more present, more engaged, and her passion was contagious. She spent an hour mentoring a bright young designer, reviewing his sketches for a community library, challenging him, inspiring him. "Don't just design a building," she told him, her voice alive with energy. "Design the experience. What does the light feel like at 10 a.m. in the children's reading nook? What is the sound of a footstep on this flooring? That's where architecture lives." That evening she drove home, to the limestone house in the Gold Coast. For the first few weeks after Dan left, the house had felt cavernously empty, haunted by the echoes of a shared life. But Kate, an architect to the core, had treated it like any other project she had redesigned. Dan's heavy mahogany furniture and boring traditional art were gone, donated to charity. In its place were the clean lines of Scandinavian design, contemporary art from local Chicago artists, and bookshelves filled with philosophy and poetry alongside her architectural tomes. The space was now a reflection of herself, quiet, sophisticated, and completely her own. She poured herself a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, put on an old jazz record, and settled into a comfortable armchair in her living room, watching the city lights begin to sparkle outside her window. The silence was no longer heavy or cold. It was peaceful. When Friday arrived, a familiar urge hit her. She finished her work, said goodbye to Sarah, and took the elevator to the private garage. There it was, gleaming under the fluorescent lights, the frozen berry Porsche. For a time she had considered selling it, worried it remained a contaminated object. But she had quickly realized that would be letting Dan and Chloe win a small, posthumous victory. She had earned this car. She had chosen it. She wouldn't let their sordid little drama define it. She slid into the driver's seat. There was no trace of unwanted perfume, only the clean, comforting smell of leather. She pulled out into the evening traffic, not heading home, but onto the open ribbon of Lakeshore Drive. The setting sun cast a fiery glow on the water, and the skyline began dressing itself in its nighttime jewels. She opened the panoramic roof, letting the cool autumn air rush in. Accelerating onto the highway, the Taycan's electric motor responded with its characteristic silent surge of power. She wasn't racing. She was flowing, becoming part of the city's electric bloodstream. She thought of the woman she had been 6 months ago. Serene, patient, but wearing the heavy armor of a secret war. That woman had been playing defense, meticulously planning a counterattack. The woman she was now was no longer at war. She had won, and in doing so, she had realized the fight itself was beneath her. Her victory was not just in Dan's fall or Chloe's humiliation. It was in this moment, the simple, profound joy of driving a car she loved through a city she helped build toward a future of her own design. The road ahead was open, curving along the beautiful, endless lakeshore. Kate tightened her grip on the steering wheel, a small, confident smile on her lips. She didn't know exactly where she was going, and for the first time in a long time, that felt absolutely perfect. That is the incredible story of how a single, audacious act of betrayal backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Kate's story is a powerful reminder that true strength isn't about being loud or flashy. It's about quiet intelligence, strategic patience, and knowing your own worth. While Chloe and Dan were busy playing a superficial game of appearances, Kate was playing chess, and she was always 3 moves ahead. She didn't just get her car back, she reclaimed her company, her power, and her life, proving that the best revenge isn't just living well, it's taking back absolutely everything that is rightfully yours. What did you think of Kate's final move? Was it justice served cold? Or did Dan and Chloe get exactly what they deserved? Let me know in the comments below. That is entirely my mistake. My apologies. I got caught up in the flow of the story. Here is the continuation of Kate's story, including the moment of her crucial new choice, written entirely in English. A new chapter. Risking the personal structure. Kate maintained her speed, but the Taycan no longer glided smoothly along Lakeshore Drive as before. The perfect structure of her afternoon had been broken by a man who didn't even know who she was. She exited the highway, parking by the lake where the fiery sunset painted Lake Michigan gold. Structural genius, a marvel worth protecting. Those words echoed in her mind. Dan saw the Porsche and thought of ownership. Chloe saw it and thought of status. The other man, a structural engineer, looked at the cantilevered western span she designed, the very soul of the work. He saw the truth. She had won the war, rebuilt her career and finances, but Kate realized that in building such strong walls around her life, she had accidentally imprisoned herself. She had reached absolute perfection and felt emotionally numb. Tranquil solitude, it turned out, was empty. Where there is truth, there is risk. Dan taught her that lesson, but he also proved that avoiding risk doesn't mean avoiding pain. Kate reached into her storage compartment, not for files or money, but for the old phone she kept there. The one she used for discreet contact with her lawyers and private investigator. She opened the Contacts app she had reinstalled. She had a name to start with. Skidmore. West Gallery coordinates. The next morning, Kate said nothing about the encounter to Sarah. She plunged into work as normal, handling meetings about materials and contracts for the museum. But there was a difference. She had made a decision. At lunchtime, she emailed her senior liaison at Skidmore. They were the structural consulting firm on the museum project. She requested a sudden, unscheduled technical meeting, not at their office, but at the west gallery of the construction site. I want a closer look at the anchor points and bearing plates of the cantilevered span. It will be an informal on-site meeting, she wrote. In the afternoon, Kate arrived at the construction site, donning a hard hat and work boots. She found a group of engineers waiting for her on the windy West Gallery deck, and he was there. "Welcome, Kate. Our guy, Elias Vance, is here," her liaison introduced. Elias Vance, a common name, an uncommon man, an extraordinary mind. "Ms. Sterling," Elias shook her hand. His hand was rough from practical work, not cold from air-conditioned boardrooms. "Apologies for my forwardness yesterday. I didn't recognize." "It's fine," Kate cut him off, her voice strangely calm. "I appreciate the attention to my work. The West Gallery is precisely why I wanted to meet. I have a few ideas about cladding materials I wanted to discuss with you directly." The meeting began, but it quickly devolved into a private discussion between Kate and Elias. He didn't flatter her about the Porsche or her wealth. He challenged her. When Kate proposed a solution for weight, Elias instantly pointed out risks regarding vibration. When she tried to negotiate on cost, he defended the structure with the unwavering conviction of a parent protecting a child. He met her as an equal, a formidable partner. The conversation became an intellectual dance Kate had longed for. "If you want durability without adding load, we have to go back to the original idea," Elias said, quickly sketching a diagram on a nearby piece of plywood. "It's less showy, but it's the most honest solution." Honest. That was the last word she expected to hear on a construction site. The meeting wrapped up. As the others left, Elias lingered. "I know I'm a stranger, but I want to apologize," Elias said, his voice sincere. "I know about you and Dan. News travels in this industry." Kate braced for the pitying words. "You don't need to—" "I'm not speaking out of pity," Elias interrupted. "I'm speaking because he's an idiot. He walked away from someone who is not only talented, but is the only architect who can see the truth behind the numbers, a rare quality. And if you need an ally, someone who understands what you're trying to build here, I'm there. Not as the structural engineer, but as a man." He held out his hand, not for a handshake, but as an offering. An invitation to partner, not just in business, but in life. Kate looked at his hand. On one side was the absolute solitude she had built. On the other was the risk of love she had sworn never to accept again. What structure would she build next?
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.